副主席、前参议长Pastusiaka先生发言，请。
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Polish Party Democratic Left Alliance, I would like to thank our Chinese host for inviting us to attend this distinguished China-Europe High-Level Political Parties Forum. I am greatly honored to address such a distinguished gathering. My brief presentation will consist of three parts. First, I would like to present you my thoughts on the Europe 2020 strategy. Secondly, I will say a few information on the Polish contribution to the implementation of this strategy. And thirdly, I would like to make a few comments on the outline of the Chinese 12th five-year plan. The main objective of the Europe 2020 strategy is to bring together the economic, social, and environmental agenda of EU in a more structured and coherent way. The idea is to reinforce the European integration process by offering stronger vision and governance model. The Strategy 2020 presents five main targets. 75% population aged 20 to 64 should be employed. 3% of EU GDP should be invested in research and development. The 2020 climate energy target should be met. The share of early school leavers should be under 10%, and at least 40% of the younger generation should have a tertiary degree. And finally, 20 million less people should be at risk of poverty. Those targets are broken into 7 flagship initiatives, dealing, for instance, with such things like innovation, education, digital agenda, industrial policy, modernization of labor markets, and reduction of poverty. In the last few years, Europe, and not only Europe, experienced the deepest economic crisis since early 1930s. Today, the economic situation in Europe is still fragile. That is why European Union needs common, coherent strategy, and not only to find exit from the crisis, but also to prevent a new recession and crises to happen again. European Union has many assets. It has strong industrial base, strong service sector, talented and creative people, efficient agriculture, single market, common currency, biggest trading bloc, strong presence in international investment market, not to mention the common political and cultural values. European Union experienced in the past many crises in the process of integration, but was always able to solve those problems through dialogue and compromise. We are also aware of weaknesses and bottlenecks in the European Union, for instance, national egoism, economic nationalism, illegal immigration, rising radical movements, protectionist tendencies, uneven level of economic development of member countries, and deficit of democracy in certain EU institutions. The question whether the goals of Europe 2020 strategy are attainable will depend on the ability of the member countries to adopt and implement their national programs compatible with the EU 2020 strategy. So what Poland is doing? The Polish National Reform Plan for the implementation of Europe 2020 strategy was adopted by the Polish Council of Ministers on April 26 this year. The National Reform Plan is the Polish contribution to the Europe 2020 strategy. It identifies our bottlenecks, weaknesses, barriers, and presents the ways to overcome them. During recent economic and financial crises, Poland was the only country in Europe which had a positive rate of growth of the economy, while all other European countries suffered from negative rate of growth. In 2010, Poland's GNP was 3.8% in comparison to the previous year. Polish economy was one of the fastest developing economies in Europe. At the same time, we also had to face difficult problems. For instance, the highest rate of unemployment exceeding 13%, budget deficit, trade deficit, and rising public debt. In correlation with Europe 2020 strategy, Polish government adopted our national program to deal with those challenges. First, it provides for the development of smart economy based on knowledge and innovation. Secondly, for support of the sustainable growth, increased competitiveness of our economy and better use of national resources. Thirdly, it provides for inclusive growth, higher employment, and greater economic and social cohesiveness. And now let me say a few remarks on the Chinese 12-year plan. Actually, 5-year plan, 12 5-year plan. My knowledge of the plan is based on reading the outline published by the Information Office of the State Council of the People's Republic of China. It is a very impressive document. The 5-year plan is extremely complex and covers the most important aspects of the life of Chinese societies: economy, standard of living, politics, social needs, culture, national defense, cooperation between defense ethnic groups, and also cooperation with the outside world. Setting the GDP growth rate of the economy at 7% for the next 5 years makes China possibly the #1 economy in the world at the end of this decade. The 12th 5-year plan is characterized also by its ambitious tasks to improve people's livelihood, well-being, raising per capita income, development of basic public service systems, expansion of consumer demands, and building a prosperous society. What is interesting to note is that there are certain similarities between the 12th 5-year plan and the Europe 2020 strategy. This is evident if one compares the 14 strategic tasks of the 5-year plan with 5 EU measurable targets and the 9 EU flagship initiatives proposed by the European Commission. In both Chinese and EU documents, one can see commitment to, among others, increase global competitiveness, develop knowledge-based economy, as well as science and education, ensure sustainable development of economy, and increase employment. In Europe 2020 strategy, there are several references to China and EU-Chinese relations. EU document favors multilateral and bilateral trade negotiations. It proposes the high-level economic dialogue with China. In the introduction to the outline of the 12th 5-year plan, there is only general reference to the opening up to the outside world without giving any specifics. Dear friends, in closing, let me say following. Because of the limit of time, I was able to call our attention only to the selected points of the two important documents. Despite the differences between EU and China, both developed strategies aiming basically at the same direction. Although there are some differences between EU and China, the draft of the common paper rightly stresses that the disagreements should be resolved through dialogue and consultations. Comprehensive partnership is not only in the interest of both EU and China, but also in the interest of the world stability and prosperity. Thank you for your attention.
谢谢